What's up everyone, this is Matt from Acoustic OST and welcome to the channel. In today's video we're going to be talking about my favorite way to add percussion into your guitar playing using the thumb slap technique. I'll show you how to do it and I'll give you my absolute best tip on how to truly master it. Now the technique is very simple, but it can be pretty challenging to properly implement it into your playing. So with that in mind, I've created 4 right hand exercises that break it down step by step, and I've also written a little percussion study so that you can apply everything that you practice into an actual piece of music. So make sure to follow the link down below to grab both of those for free. So first things first, how do we actually do this technique? As the name suggests, all you're really doing is taking the thumb of your plucking hand and slapping it into your bass strings. What this does is it drives the string into your guitar and produces a very percussive, kind of snare-like sound. So it sounds like this. So as I said, fairly simple, but there's a couple things that you really want to keep in mind before we even jump into the exercises. So the biggest thing is the placement of the thumb on the string. So almost always, right after the slap, you're immediately going to follow it with a bass note. So you want to think about what part of your thumb you normally use just to pluck. And that is the part you want to use for the string slap. So that you can do the slap and then immediately pluck afterwards. For any classical players out there, I do want to make a quick note that usually our right hand position is a little bit higher and we use our nails to pluck all the strings. For this technique, I've found it's a lot more helpful to have a bit of a lower wrist. So it does mean when I pluck the bass notes after the string slap, I don't really use my nail, I use more of the flesh of the thumb. So now that we've talked about where to place your thumb for the slap itself, we're going to jump into the exercises. Each of these exercises builds on the one that comes before it, so you really want to master each one before you move on to the next. So let's jump into exercise number 1. Now exercise number 1, very, very basic. All we're doing is alternating bass notes with the string slap. So it's going to look and sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you really want to focus on getting a strong sound out of your string slap, as well as really making sure that you're not speeding up or slowing down. If you're having trouble keeping a steady tempo, I would recommend busting out the old handy metronome to really force yourself to stay in time. So for example number 2, this is where it starts to get pretty challenging because we're actually going to add a melody note above the string slap. So how this is achieved is actually by flicking your index finger out towards the melody note. It's kind of like a mini strum, but you're really only aiming for one string. So it's going to look like this. So we really want to focus on using the wrist to actually drive our index finger into that melody note. So when our wrist turns this way to then kind of wind up for the string slap, as it comes back down, it turns your hand. And you're going to use that to kind of use the momentum of that to really drive that index finger through the string. So again, it would really slow, it would look like this. I pluck, and then when I go to do the slap, I slap here and it's going to drive my index finger through that first string. So now that we've talked about how to do exercise number 2, I'm going to give you my tip to really master this. And even though this is a right hand technique, the trick is really in your left hand, and it comes down to left hand muting. So what I mean by left hand muting is just laying one or more fingers across the strings without actually applying any pressure into the strings. So when you pluck or strum, you get kind of a hollow, muffled, muted sound. So the reason this is the key to really mastering this technique is that when you do the flick, it's super easy to hit more strings. Sometimes it doesn't sound so bad, but if you hit a note that's not part of the chord, it's going to sound pretty nasty. So you really want to make sure to mute the adjacent strings to whatever the melody note is. So in this exercise, we're aiming for our first string with the flick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute any of the adjacent strings. So you can take any finger of your left hand, lay it gently on the second, and maybe even the third string if you're really having trouble with accuracy. So when you go to pluck it, you have mute, mute, and then a string. Mute, mute, string. So when you do it all together, it would sound something like this. It sounds really clear. The muted strings actually give an extra little oomph to the percussive sound. And if I took them away, it would sound something like this. which doesn't necessarily sound bad, but usually we really only want to get one note so that that melody note really stands out in whatever piece of music we're playing. So this brings us to exercise number 3, which is pretty much the same as the second one, except now we're moving the melody from the E string to the B string. So for the left hand muting on this one, because we're going to be plucking the B string, we want to mute the third and the first string. So you can take 2 of your fingers, second, first finger, whatever you want, mute the E, mute the G, and then when you go to strum, all you're really left with is the B note, which is what we want. If I were to play this, it would sound like this. And now switching to the B, E, B. And if you notice, again, my fingers are just very gently resting against the strings to get that muted sound. So I'm going to use this exercise to point out one more way that we can use left hand muting, and that's actually when we fret a note. So let's take our second finger, we're going to put it on the note D, which is 3rd fret, 2nd string. And then when I play this, I'm going to lean this finger back so that the back of my finger just ever so slightly touches that E string. And I can mute it that way. This is really, really handy when you have a lot of stuff going on, because you don't always have a free finger that's easily within reach of muting the other strings. So this brings us to exercise number 4. It's the same thing, but now we're putting the melody in 8th notes. For most of the songs you're going to be playing, there's going to be a lot of different rhythms going on in the melody, so we want to really get used to playing quicker rhythms, not just quarter notes. So this one's going to sound like this. So for the right hand fingering, I would suggest plucking middle, index, flick with index, and then pluck again with index. So M, I, M, I. And once you really get comfortable with that right hand fingering and get everything really, really consistent, then you can try moving that note onto the 2nd string and continuing that exercise. So that brings us to the end of the exercises. Once again, make sure to follow the link below to grab the exercises and the percussion study for free. And please leave me a comment down below letting me know if there's anything you need clarification on or any topics you'd like me to cover in future tutorials. I would really love to hear your progress on the percussion study, so if you want any of my personal feedback, take a video of yourself playing a section or the whole thing, tag me on Instagram, and I'll make sure to give you any advice that I have. So next is going to be my full run through of the percussion study. I want to note that I kept it intentionally simple, though simple does not necessarily mean easy. There is a lot of shifting going on, a lot of moving melody notes with the left hand, but it is simple in terms of there's one bass note, one melody note, and the thumb slap, and that's really it. So good luck with this study. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.